All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome on back live from Drew's house in our kitchen. Another edition here. My name's Drew Moholland. This is my wife, Sarah Conway. Hello, Sarah.
Hello.
Hello. Coffee mugs?
Mine is boring.
Mine's a little more exciting today. No musician on today, so we're away from the Beatles mug. On to the great American television show, Friends.
Mm-hmm.
You were just suggesting that we might have to order more coffee mugs.
Yeah, I mean, I think people are going to get sick of the same coffee mugs over and over again.
It's kind of become a little shtick here doing the coffee mugs thing. Mm-hmm. And didn't we have more coffee mugs at one point? You threw a bunch away, didn't you?
Yeah. Yep. The sad thing is I was decluttering everything in the house and was just in the mood to get rid of things. And I got rid of a bunch of coffee mugs and cups and that stuff. So.
She does not like the clutter, folks.
I do. But every time I do something like that, I immediately afterwards need those things, whatever I get rid of. So
here you go.
I should be a hoarder.
You once called me a hoarder, which is not true. I don't hoard. I just have I'm connected to things.
Yeah, a lot of things.
Well, what a great show yesterday was. Ryan Montalbleu. It's more like Montbleu. I always have a tough time with his name. It's like Ryan Montalbleu.
I was he pronounced his name in it, and I was trying to figure out if that's how he pronounced it different.
He says it more naturally.
I think naturally there's kind of like that A sound in the middle.
I think so too. But how great was he? He's a great awesome musician.
Yeah.
And a really nice guy too. Which is always fun when people are nice that you have never met before.
Yeah, he was very nice.
It's such a unique world meeting people. Like, I tend to be comfortable meeting musicians like in person and everything. But virtually it feels kind of weird. Like you never know if you're gonna give off like the wrong vibe or something, you know. But he was very nice. I thought that was cool.
Yeah.
Not that we expected anything different, but just a very down-to-earth guy. We're from the same neck of the woods, so that's cool. So that was a fun show with Ryan. We appreciate him doing it yesterday. Hope you all enjoyed it. We went like 90 minutes, which is, I think, the longest show we've ever done. I actually had to call over to the station to apologize for the long show. But anyways, today, we don't really use the T or like the trains too often. Is that fair to say, Sarah?
Yeah, no, we should use them more often, but we don't really go that many places.
I'm talking pre-pandemic too.
Yeah. But we lived in the city for a while, and when we did live in the city, we did a lot.
I wouldn't say a lot though. We did. We had cars, like people that use
we didn't use the T a lot, but we did a lot of things.
Oh, okay. We still do a lot of things. We stop with that. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, I guess we could.
But I always said that though, even in the city, we were Brighton, you know, every now and then I'd take like the 57 bus, I think it was, but I never really, I had a car. I was always driving, you know?
Yeah, I didn't like the bus.
You didn't like the 57 bus?
The buses in general. I just don't really like taking the bus.
Well, I'm going to have Tory Mazzola on here in just a moment. He is the head of the commuter rail. He's the spokesperson for the commuter rail. He's actually the spokesperson for Keolis, which runs the commuter rail, which is all owned by the T.
Okay.
Did you follow that?
No.
Yeah. Okay. And Tory actually asked me. We've talked plenty of times over the years because just my following stories, I always have to go through him and bother Tory. And one of the funny. I've asked him. You want to come on my show? I think we could have some interesting things to talk about. And he goes, cool, yeah. I don't think we could fill the whole show up about trains. And I said, we'll talk about some other stuff too. So we plan on doing that with Tory Mazzola in a second. Then you're going to get out of the way. You're going to go hang with the dogs today for this one?
Yeah, the dogs tend to be in the way. So I'm going to try and occupy them while you're here. Probably bring food upstairs.
The dogs, you can usually tell when the dogs are going to be a disruption. And it seems like they are for this particular show. So Sarah's going to go ahead and do that. And I think I'll bring Tory in. Anything else you got to say?
Nope.
No? You got a lot of fans out there. You sure? No, it's true. You got to read your Facebook posts.
Okay.
All right. Bye-bye. Cheers.
Cheers.
Goodbye, Sarah. All right. Let's bring in Tory Mazzola here. All right. Welcome back. Tory Mazzola, our guest. Great to see you, Tory. You are the spokesman for Keolis, which runs the commuter rail. And I always say it's all under the big umbrella of the MBTA. Follow that, right?
That's right. Thanks for having me on. Look forward to the conversation.
Absolutely, man. I hope, well, first of all, let's get this out of the way. How you doing in quarantine? Crazy times out there.
It is crazy times, and I'm in an industry that is part of the essential workforce. So we are, it's really impressive to see all our Keolis employees around Boston stepping up to deliver commuter rail service during these challenging times. But for me personally, I have 3 young children, and my wife and I are trying to juggle this circumstance with, school closed and other activities closed and shut down the best we can, just like everybody else.
Yeah, I know you said to me right before we started, let me go make sure the kids are all settled down in there. I have to settle down my 2 dogs. I have an old one who's pretty calm. The puppy, just every time you start these things, likes to jump in. So if he jumps in, you've been warned. But dogs can. I don't know. Apparently they like these shows, but it is crazy. I mean, I know you guys are obviously you've reduced schedules, and talk about life running the trains through this time. Though, I mean, people are still having to go to work. Those essential personnel, and you're still having to run trains. It's wild.
Yeah, I mean that's a good point. So I mean, we reduced the service schedule probably maybe 2 months ago when the pandemic started to ramp up, and we did that in coordination with the Governor Baker administration as well as the MBTA. So that was really to help to reflect the fact that ridership is significantly reduced during this type of crisis. Of course, it's unprecedented, so we've never been through a circumstance like this, but we know that ridership is down somewhere in the range of 3 to 7% of what it normally is. So that's a significant reduction. And what we're seeing on the trains is really nurses, medical professionals, grocery store employees, all of the essential employees that need to get to and from work. Those are the types of people that are still, out there and trying to get around the greater Boston area.
What was the percentage that it's down?
It's down. It's at 3 to 7% is our estimate of normal ridership.
Oh, okay. So
it's down about 95%.
Yeah. I mean, it's not good for business, but it's good that people are adhering to staying at home, essentially. Tell me what the meetings are like. Because, I mean, are you literally having like Zoom meetings with government officials and this is how we're handling business these days?
Sure. So a lot of that is managed by the MBTA. So our role is to operate and maintain the service for the MBTA. And so we have a lot of meetings internally at Keolis focused on commuter rail and the commuter rail workforce. So, for instance, today, Governor Baker announced a policy that'll be effective on May 6th for all residents of Massachusetts to wear masks when they're out in public spaces if they can't properly socially distance. And so, we're dealing with, policy changes that happen, regularly, and as you would expect in a crisis like this. And so we want to make sure that when the policy changes, we're in a position to really cover off 2 bases. One is make sure our employees, we have 2,400 employees in the greater Boston area, have the protection and the communications and the resources they need to do their job as effectively as they can, and also to make sure that our passengers are aware and informed of the new policies. And so, we monitor those types of public health announcements, and then we communicate accordingly.
So those are, that's current living in a pandemic stuff you're all going through. I'm sure you're looking ahead too. I mean, life post-pandemic, and everybody's talking about what life might be like on the other side of this thing. I'm sure you're looking at that too. Has there been any talk about how the system will adjust to post-pandemic life?
Yeah, sure. So, really, Massachusetts, we think is still in the surge is what we're hearing from the public health experts. And so, ultimately, we're still very focused on ensuring people take the precautions they need so that we can come back down, the other side of this surge. I will say one of the benefits of being part of Keolis, which is a global public transit operator that has networks in about 16 different countries around the world. Massachusetts is one of the regions where we do operate. So we're on a call weekly with all of the other subsidiaries around the world, learning from the things that they're doing, sharing our best practices. And one really specific example, I think, to your question, is Denmark. So we have operations in Denmark, and they're on, maybe the tail end of the surge. So they've already kind of peaked, and they're starting to return to, I guess, what we call the new normal, right? Normal is probably not coming back for a while. And so they're putting in place in Denmark ways to properly social distance on buses and trams and subways. What are the mask protocols? How is it enforced? And so, one really specific example is there's an app that we use in Denmark, or public transit operators use in Denmark, that informs potential riders, people who are considering the service for that day, how crowded a bus or a train is on that particular moment. And so that helps people make good decisions for them, so they can properly socially distance, and also they can also catch a later train if one is crowded.
Interesting. That's I see some parallels. I had a flight attendant on here last week, and she was saying some of these flights are taken off with 10 people. She had one flight with one person on. Obviously, the airline business is struggling right now, but they were talking about how their social distancing on the airplane is consisting of you can't sell more than one seat in each row. Is that some of the stuff that we're being looked at for trains?
Well, sure. So in Boston, again, to maybe reiterate, we're not having those discussions at this moment. Again, we're focused on getting past the surge and working with the MBTA the best we can. Again, examples from other parts of the world, those are the types of things we're seeing where, on a bus, there may be seats that are restricted, with, tape markings over them so that people don't sit on them, and they properly socially distance. The app is another good example to inform people to make decisions before they leave their house, exactly what bus or train will be the most effective for them. But we're seeing, companies come in and reduce the capacity of buses and public transit so that when people come on to ride, they can be assured that social distancing does in fact happen.
There you go. New world here, huh?
It really is. It really is. The other challenge we're facing is the supply chain, right? So
yeah,
we need to make sure we have a large inventory of masks and hand sanitizer. One of the first things we did when the pandemic started to increase or peak was make sure that all of our employees who don't have ready access to hand washing facilities have company provided hand sanitizer to make sure they're able to wash their hands as much as they need to. And so, that's another example of really trying to manage the supply chain and make sure we have the resources to keep our employees safe.
Again, Tory Mazzola joining us here, spokesperson for Keolis, which runs the commuter rail. Nobody plans for a worldwide pandemic, but was there any, were you guys, can anybody be prepared for this at all? Were there systems in place where, okay, you know what, it's here, now let's move on? Or is it literally everybody looks at each other in a room and goes, uh-oh, what do we do?
Well, speaking for myself, I've been in public transit for about 3 years. And so my experience with issues like this is very limited.
Yeah.
It's not to say that the crisis communications or crisis management playbook changes dramatically for a pandemic. Certainly there are some nuances. So for Keolis here in Boston, early on, we started having internal calls to start to manage, again, the supply chain, the employee procedures, the passenger procedures, certainly before we got to the surge, so that we were thinking about the future as much as we could. We didn't have a crystal ball, but we knew, having seen, I think at this point it was Washington State and Oregon and California that started to maybe be the wave in the United States first. So when we started to see that, some of the factors we did or we put in place were ensuring that our teams were on calls, almost every day, try to be ahead of it as much as we can.
And the dog has made his appearance. It's interesting to me. I want, let's have some fun with this too, because I have, you said you've been in this for 3 years. What did you do before that? First of all, actually, that might be interesting. Little background, career track.
Yeah, sure. So my background is in communications. I've worked in political communications on Capitol Hill and the U.S. Senate and the U.S. House for different members. I worked at the National Political Party and a National Political Party for a couple of years, and I worked in corporate communications for Bauer Hockey, Easton Baseball, which is a company located here in Exeter, New Hampshire. And from there, I transitioned to Keolis to take a similar role in communications and public affairs in public transit.
Okay, so there you go. Here's your chance. Let's have a little fun with this, because I have, I've been in the news business since college, so out of college. So it's been a decade now, and always have to deal with bugging you people. You have a very hard job. It's like, I can't imagine. I'm not envious. We hang up with you a lot and we go, poor Tory, this is a tough spot to be in because we know he's getting calls from me and like every news station in the city, maybe out of the city across New England. So let's just ask it very straight up. Do you ever get really sick of the journalists calling you?
No, I don't think so. It's been a part of the job. Like I mentioned, my career's been in media relations for, since I graduated college, really. And in politics, it's very similar where the journalists call you all day long and you've got to be responsive. So I know the media has a job to do. I know that I have a job to do. And I think, I don't think I'll ever be upset with the media calling me. I think part of the benefit when the media calls you is you can, inform your stakeholders or your passengers about an important update. So, we have to go through the media to update them on mask policies or train procedure policies that are constantly evolving. And we rely on the media to get the word out because really, social media is great and paid advertising is great, but, mass communication through the media is really still one of the most effective ways to communicate.
So you're not going to tell me who the most annoying journalist is, or that's not going to happen?
Maybe not today.
We can talk after the show. No, it's and I will say you are actually, there's some companies and organizations that are better than others, and you always do a very great job and very straightforward. When we have questions, you answer them, and we appreciate you being there. It really is you do a good job.
No, thanks a lot. No, I enjoy doing it.
And you're dealing with let's face it, you've come into Boston here, which is not exactly a brand new commuter rail system, not a brand new MBTA system. It's the oldest in the world, right? MBTA?
It is. I think the tagline is, again, I don't work for the MBTA, but I think it's the first subway in the United States was the MBTA subway.
Right. So the nature of that, you're going to have issues. It's just going to happen in a city like Boston. So, you deal with, what's the toughest thing you've had to deal with? What's the toughest story?
Well, the toughest story I've had to deal with, the pandemic is probably one of the most challenging. It's topical right now, but you see we've got a visitor here. That's more
the dog has arrived. Would you like to say hello, Mookie? Here you go. Here, this is Mookie. Okay.
Hi, Mookie.
Yeah.
So if anybody walks by my house, you'll hear my dog Gilly bark. So Gilly's a Bernedoodle. He's a Bernese Mountain Dog mixed with a poodle, and he's, I think, 1.5, so he's still a little on the hyper side.
Yeah, he's 1.5 too, this guy.
Yep.
He's the puppy thing's got to go away soon, but he's energy full. But so this is the toughest. This is the toughest story, you think?
Well, it's challenging, I think, because it has so many different layers to it. So there's the organizational challenge from an employee perspective, because we're an essential part of the workforce that has to continue to run operations just like a grocery store and just like the hospitals. We call it our heroes moving heroes. We have heroes on commuter rail moving heroes to get to their work, and it's a campaign we've run. So we have that element. You also have the added element of it's largely a Department of Public Health issue, so we're very much secondary to this. If not even, lower in the pecking order than that from a state government perspective. But you're also dealing with, like I said, 3 kids who aren't in school, they don't have daycare, and I'm working from home like everybody else and adjusting to Zoom calls and other, remote forms of communication to make decisions and to get the word out to passengers and stakeholders as effectively as you can in an entirely new world.
Yeah, it is crazy. And even in like the best of times when you're, half of this stuff you must be watching Twitter some days, and if a train is late or something, and which whatever, it happens for whatever reason, and you see people going crazy on Twitter, you must be looking at it like, what am I supposed to do here? And then you have to give some response. What's that situation like watching angry commuters or whatever?
Yeah, we could have a day with 92-93% of our trains are on time, and historically that would be a pretty good average. You referenced that some of the rolling stock trains and infrastructure has, I think it's been publicly said many times, has been neglected over the last several decades. So if we delivered a 92 or 93% on-time performance one day, that's historically and, on the aggregate, a pretty good day. It certainly is above the averages. But but we'll still get complaints from passengers whose train is late. And to be honest, I don't blame them, because all that matters to them is their train. And so our goal is to make sure that all of our passengers have, a safe and reliable way to get to and from work or to see their loved ones or whatever the case is. So, for that, 5, 6, or 7% of the trains that are late, even if it's a really, good day on the aggregate, I don't blame passengers for being upset and communicating their views, because what matters to them is if they got to work on time and if they got to see their family on time. So, I can appreciate that perspective from the passengers.
Is there ever a moment where you, I'm sure there is. Everybody who works in any profession has these moments, but where you go to lay your head on the pillow at night and you say, that was a really rough day. What did I get myself into here?
I probably have. I'm trying to think of one, but we had product recalls when I worked in the sports equipment business. I was in public relations again, and so we had a product recall, related to various products that were really challenging to deal with and governing bodies to deal with, and so those come to mind as ones that were pretty challenging.
Governor Baker was, I think, whenever that survey was, maybe within the last year, was voted like the most liked governor in the country. And by all accounts, I'm not sure how much that has changed. It seems like he's still right up there, if not in that same spot. And I think he's handled this well as well. I wonder, from your perspective, what's it like working with the governor and this team? Is it because you must be pretty much hand in hand and following every word he says, and that's going to be interesting.
Sure. So we work hand in hand with the MBTA, and so indirectly we do follow Governor Baker and his administration's communications and policies as they affect our organization. I grew up in Wakefield, Massachusetts, so I have, although I live in New Hampshire now, I have some roots in the Bay State. So I think one of the things that has made Governor Baker so successful is he's solutions oriented, and so the way, at least as an outsider looking in the context of the things I read, he approaches challenges in ways that I think most elected officials maybe don't. He's willing to work with people to find, solutions to people that will help people in their everyday lives. And he's really pragmatic about it. And I think, for someone like him as a Republican governor in a largely, blue state, to achieve, national levels of popularity is a credit to him. It's a credit to his team. It's a credit to the way he operates as an elected official, and for the people that he finds, areas of common ground to work with. And I think if you look in other parts of the country at the national or state level, you don't see that type of cooperation for sort of the common good. And I think that's, in my view, one of the things that sets him apart.
Again, Tory Mazzola, the spokesperson for Keolis here, which runs the commuter rail. Without getting into, I don't want to get into the politics of it all, but a big talk about the Olympics, when they were talking about the pitch to bring the Olympics to Boston, was could our system, could our trains handle it? Could the MBTA handle moving all these people around? And of course, the opposition to that was, of course not. That's ridiculous. It's a small city. It's too crammed. All that stuff. I've always wondered for the opinion of an official that actually works in the business. Would we have been okay if the Olympics came here?
I have to be honest. I didn't follow that campaign as closely as, I followed some others. I think I may have lived in Washington, D.C. at the time.
Yeah.
But, maybe reflecting on it, I think one of the things I've seen leading up to other cities hosting Olympics is a major round of investments into public transit and many other things too, to boost the existing infrastructure to support something like that. I know Boston has confronted other major events in the city. And I think, I would assume that those investments would come to fruition and support the infrastructure and the rolling stock and the public transit in a way that could have delivered it. But again, I didn't follow it closely enough to give probably much more of a detailed answer.
Gotcha. What's a day like Marathon Monday, like when the city is just madness, everybody's using the train system, or like a parade, just where it's just everybody's in the city and everybody's coming in and out? What are those days like? Is that just is that like the Super Bowl of
Yeah, those can be challenging days because there's such a high level of ridership that needs to come in and out of the city, for a parade or for other things. And we've been really fortunate, again, here I grew up in Massachusetts, to be part of, this title town era where I think we've had, 4, championship parades since Keolis took over the operation of commuter rail. So we've got a pretty, well-oiled model to
I like that. You guys should make T-shirts. 4 championships under Keolis. That's good.
I think that's good. It's also a chance for us to shine, right? Because we can take examples of, the ways that other parts of the world, try to move people in such large volumes on one day. And so there's always going to be stresses on the system, and you want to approach those, to anticipate them as best you can, and then respond as effectively to those that maybe you didn't anticipate. And so really, we want all of our passengers to have a good experience, and we try to anticipate, what may come up to make the flow in and out of North Station as effective as possible. Because at the end of the day, we have to play a role in getting people in and out of the city, because public transit is vital to that type of event when the roads, just literally couldn't handle that amount of traffic.
Absolutely. What is the story that, you get the call, this is happening on whatever line, and you have to kind of do a double take. Wait a second, what now? What happened? How did that break down? Like, is there one story that's just odd or freaky or weird? Like, what's the one that comes to mind where you're like, how am I going to answer this question when they call?
Well, I don't know that I have one example, but, typically that process would look like, something, maybe is posted on Twitter, and so I'll see it, and we'll want to investigate it as quickly as we can to actually find out precisely what happened. And oftentimes it's from our team, our conductors, our engineers. We'll send in a report and we'll get information that way. One of the things we've really tried to emphasize, again, in partnership with the MBTA, is communicating as clearly as we can to our passengers, because they need to, in some cases, make alternative plans if there's a situation that may cause significant delays on the commuter rail. And so I think what we've seen over the last 4 or 5 years is an increase in the amount of information we put out when incidents do occur on the network. And our focus really is to, again, get it resolved as quickly as we can and inform our passengers clearly so that they know, to the extent that it's possible, how long the delay will be, what the resolution will be, and sometimes what the cause is, because oftentimes they're curious to know, was it an engine issue? Was it a switch issue? Was it a bridge issue? There's a lot of dynamics that go into making a commuter rail network run smoothly, and we want our passengers to be well informed in those situations.
Cool. All right. Well, very good. We covered a lot of ground there. Let's meet the man a little bit. All the cities you've lived in. Go.
Okay. So Wakefield, Massachusetts, Malden, Massachusetts.
Stop on Wake. As the dog barks, actually, it makes me think Wakefield has a great walking dog lake there.
Lake Quannapowitt.
It
absolutely does. It absolutely does. I've run around it. I've rollerbladed around it as a young, high school hockey player. I've driven my car around it. It's a centerpiece to Wakefield, I think.
All right. Sorry. Keep going.
No, it's okay. So Wakefield, Malden, Massachusetts. Then I went off to college in Durham, New Hampshire. I lived in a couple of different places in Washington, D.C. I lived in Las Vegas, which I'm sure might, intrigue some conversation. And then I moved to New Hampshire, and I live in Exeter, New Hampshire now.
Okay. I probably, what's the best Vegas story? No, it stays in Vegas, right? Isn't that the whole thing? How's the public transit in Vegas? You always checking that out?
Yeah. So when I lived there, I worked on a campaign for a U.S. senator, and all around the hotels in downtown Las Vegas, there's all sorts of ways to get around, buses and monorails, and obviously Lyft and Uber and all sorts of different ways. But yeah. How
is Lyft and Uber? Like, there's probably, I can imagine there's no, like, people, if you want to take a Lyft or an Uber, but does that like change the game at all as far as the numbers go down of traveling? People that take the train are just taking the train, right? There's no like crossover of lost business, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of anecdotal evidence. I'm not sure I've seen specific research on it, but I think, in certain markets, you can see some people taking Uber or Lyft instead of, public transit. I think, one of the things that, public transit operators look to do is make sure that their pricing model is as effective as it can be, their reliability is as effective as it can be. because at the end of the day, the common good from a traffic standpoint, from a sustainability, a climate change standpoint, is to get as many people as you can on public transit and grow the service around, that feature. One of the downsides of Uber and Lyft and other services like them is that oftentimes it can create more traffic, again, according to some of the reports I've read.
Because they circle around.
Yeah, there's more cars on the road, and sometimes they have one or two people in them. And so, again, you really want, as a public policy, to get more and more people on.
Absolutely. Again, Tory Mazzola joining us here. You want to do a little rapid fire here before we,
Sure.
God, Mookie is very, very loud right now. I think, you know what, the sun has burst through here in our kitchen. So usually it likes to get outside when the sun bursts through.
I think we're all eager for some sunshine after, I think, 3 days of rain.
Oh man, it is crazy. It's and then summertime. I'm curious to see how all the hunkering down policies, how everybody does with that when the weather gets warm, but that's neither here nor there. All right, let's meet the man, Tory Mazzola, a little bit. Favorite hobby?
Ice hockey.
Ice hockey, thus the Bauer connection. Okay, favorite team, is it the Bruins or?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. Boston Bruins.
Favorite player?
Ray Bork.
Oh, it was interesting you say that. Do you know Ray Bork was my old Little League coach?
Oh, that's amazing.
Yes, I played with
So the
Chris.
Borks grew up in Danvers. Did you grow up in Danvers?
I am coming to you from Danvers right now.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, born and raised here, and I've now moved on the other side of town from where I grew up, but just close enough to where my parents can swing by, but not come by every 2 seconds.
Perfect.
But
So,
yeah, Ray,
tell me some. I don't know if I'm allowed to ask questions, but tell me a story about Ray Bork as a Little League coach.
you know what my funniest story with Ray is, and I will remember this until the day I die. My dad was also a coach on the team, so Ray and my dad were actually the two assistants. There was another head coach, but so there was one practice where we were stretching or whatever, warming up in the outfield. And Ray says to my dad, I got a pretty good pitch. Get behind the plate. Let me show it to you. So my dad's like, you're not going to gun a fastball. He's like, no. He gets by. Ray throws a knuckleball and to my dad, and the thing, it dazzles. Like my dad's never seen it before.
Amazing.
And it actually gets my dad right in a spot where you don't want to get hit in. So my dad goes down. Ray feels horrible. Next thing you know, Ray's over. My dad asks him if he's okay. My mother happens to be, it was a hot summer day or whatever. My mother comes driving down with all the water bottles and treats for the team. She sees Ray over, my dad hurt in pain on the ground. She said, what is going on? That's what I always remember.
Oh, that's great. It sounds like a perfect Little League memory.
Yeah, I guess that's the first one that comes to mind. But no, he was great. I mean, he was there for my first home run. I remember him coaching third base and gave me a big slap five on the way in and said, I remember, it's almost like slow motion when you're doing that. And I remember crossing third base. He goes, congrats there, buddy. And, yeah, so he's a great guy though. Awesome.
Good to hear. Obviously I've never met him, don't know him, but that's great to hear.
And I played with his son, Chris, who Chris had a nice little career there. I think he was playing overseas last time I checked, but Chris was a good player, and Ryan, they both had nice little careers too. So
great. That's great. Good family.
All right, so Ray's your favorite player, and Andy's a good guy, so check mark to that. What's favorite musician?
Favorite musician? I really jump around quite a bit on this, so, if I guess today my answer would be the Foo Fighters, if I can say a band, because I've been listening to a lot of the Foo Fighters, now that I'm home and throw my headset on and do some work in the office. So I'm going to stick with the Foo Fighters.
All right, Foo Fighters, very good. He's been pretty good, Dave Grohl, with the streaming and everything. He's kind of been out there and doing a lot of stuff, and it's been good. So what's are you a concert guy? What's the favorite concert you've ever been to?
I do really like concerts. I've been to, I probably go to 2 or so a year. I recently, I guess maybe a couple years ago, saw Pearl Jam at Fenway Park and had, what I thought were really good seats. So, the stage typically goes, at least for the day I was there, I think it always goes in center field.
Yep.
And my seats were in right field, like just into fair territory by Pesky's pole. And I was the second row up. So I was slightly elevated over the crowd that was seated or standing in the outfield. So I could see over them. And I was, again, in the second row. So I had a really good line to the stage, and it was Pearl Jam. It was a great, summer night. The weather was awesome. It was a great show.
Let's hope we can get back to doing those at some point here.
Yeah, I know it.
What you mentioned, you were ran some political campaigns. What's the toughest part about running a political campaign? It's kind of the season to talk about it, right?
Yeah, sure. I think the toughest part of running a campaign is, well, first of all, you want to have a good candidate, and that makes
helps.
everything a lot easier.
Yeah.
But I think the constraint is resources, right? So you're doing a lot of things, direct mail, email marketing, events, looking for people to come and support your candidate. You have so many activities that you need to do, television advertising, but you have to do it on a limited budget. And so I think, certainly a lesson that I learned in campaigns is how to do a lot with a little. And, you see campaigns always struggling with resources and trying to raise more money and try to keep their, burn rate, so to speak, as low as they can. I think that's probably the answer.
Is it, where'd you say you are in New Hampshire again?
Exeter.
You're in Exeter. So what is out of all those places you mentioned you lived in, is it Vegas? What's the best place to live?
Vegas was a lot of fun because I was on a political campaign, and those are always really exciting. And that particular race was a U.S. senator running for re-election against a candidate who really, to my point, didn't have resources, didn't have name recognition, didn't really have a lot of momentum. So we won that race, I want to say, by maybe 20 points, which is really a landslide in a sort of battleground state like Nevada.
So when you think Vegas, you think political wins is what you think?
Yeah, and Las Vegas was a tough part of the state for us to win, and we held our own. So it was good. Washington, D.C. is a great place to live. I went there straight out of college. I worked on Capitol Hill, so there's a lot of other young professionals who, want to meet other people and learn about, where they're from and the stories that they have, and all the interactions with elected officials, U.S. senators, people in the administration. That's for me, was a really exciting place because I was a political science major, so going to Capitol Hill and being in Washington was, to me, kind of like a front row seat to the things I learned in college.
Cool. And how'd you choose Exeter to settle down with the family?
Yeah, so when I left Washington D.C., I was working for the National Republican Party, and we were targeting congressional races to pick up seats. And New Hampshire just made a lot more sense for the organization where I worked because I was commuting down to D.C. We had two races we were hoping to win in New Hampshire at that time. My wife and I were starting a family, so we wanted to leave Washington, D.C. and get back closer to home. And, my family has, connections, and we spent some time up in the Lakes region, and I still have family in Massachusetts. So Exeter, made sense from a business perspective, but it also made sense to be sort of halfway between where my family was in New Hampshire and Massachusetts.
All right. Well, that makes sense. You said you had 3 kids?
I do.
What are the ages?
So I have a 2-year-old Lee J, a girl. I have a 8-year-old Nora, and I have a 10-year-old boy named Will.
Oh my goodness. You are a busy man in quarantine.
Very much so. Very much. My wife has been really, really disciplined with creating a schedule for them. And I'm surprised every day at the level of commitment they have to their schedule. It's amazing how dedicated they are to just staying on schedule, because I feel like if I tried to get them to focus on schoolwork, they just wouldn't do it.
Yeah. All right. So you're giving your wife all the credit on that one.
It's appropriate.
It's funny. I mean, when I think about my wife and I have talked about this. We don't have kids yet, but we've kind of at that point where we're thinking about it. But we've put ourselves in the shoes of parents with young kids, and it's hard.
Yeah, it's a lot to juggle. And my 8 and 10-year-old, typically, like I said, they focus on their schedule and they go down the list of activities that some are academic and some are more fun that we put together for them every day. But our 2-year-old is a lot to juggle. I mean, we love the side benefit of spending so much time with our kids. We have family dinners and family breakfasts almost every day, which, when I'm commuting into work to Boston most days, is a little bit of a rarity. So there are some benefits, but, trying to juggle my wife working, myself working, and our 2-year-old, you'd be amazed to see how effective we are, how productive we are during nap times.
I can. Well, it's certainly a story that a lot of families are dealing with right now, right? I mean, it's a story all across the country, all across the world, really.
Yeah, there's no alternative.
Certainly not. I noticed you had a coffee mug there. It's part of our show. You got to show the coffee mug before we wind down. What are you working with there?
So this is, I have it coincidentally. It wasn't strategic, but it's a coffee mug of pictures of myself or with my kids or other pictures of my kids.
Ah, that's great.
Yeah.
That was a nice segue there into the kids talking to the. I'm more cliche. I just got the Great American TV show, Friends. We're running out of coffee mugs here. If we're going to make it a shtick on the show, we really need to get more. We were talking about that at the beginning of the show, but.
So my wife has a coffee cup kind of like that. That's on the medium to larger side, and it's got the big opening. And we were just debating the other day that I strongly prefer the normal size or small coffee cup because it keeps the coffee warmer for longer. Yeah,
I agree with you. This mug actually kind of bothers me in every way. I agree on the temperature, but I also just don't like the handling of it. I don't know. There's something about it. Like it's kind of like if you get like my drink of choice tends to be like whiskey, and I like it in a whiskey glass though. Like if you give Jack Daniels like in a big glass, it's very unappealing to me. Like I need the glass. It's part of the experience.
I agree.
Okay.
I agree.
Good.
Sometimes you tailgate and you see people drink bourbon out of a red Solo cup, and it just, doesn't appeal to me quite the same as a nice cold glass with some ice.
Yeah, I don't know. That's maybe, yeah. I don't know what it is about it, but it's just, that's the deal. Tory Mazzola, this was fun, man. I appreciated getting to meet the man behind all those annoying phone calls that we give you all the time. We appreciate you being a good sport. And it was nice to actually get to talk with you on a lighter setting here. This is good.
Yeah, same here. And keep the calls coming because we rely on the media, especially WBZ, to get the word out for us. It's really helpful.
Well, that's good to hear, man. It was a pleasure catching up with you. Get back to the kids there. I'm sure they miss you already, right?
Great. Thanks again. Appreciate it.
All right, man.
Bye.
All right. Very cool. Tory Mazzola right there. Hope you all enjoyed that. Good guy. I always knew he was a good guy. It's funny. You don't really get to meet these people though when you're on the kind of on the beat and just looking for information. It's his job. It's my job to get information out of these people and, his job to give it. And sometimes you feel like it feels a little hollow when you don't actually get to meet the person. And I've always had good experiences with him on the phone, but it's usually a business approach. So this was nice to kind of settle down and meet the man, Tory Mazzola, who has a tough job. That is a very tough job, being the spokesperson for Keolis, which runs the commuter rail in Boston, trains, and the issues that come with trains and the old systems, that is the MBTA. It is tough to be a spokesperson for that. You can imagine some of the issues he has to deal with on a daily basis and handles it with a smile, as you saw there. Probably a good demeanor for that job. Nice kind of laid back guy, but very well spoken. So it was nice to meet Tory Mazzola. Nice to see you all again. We'll be back tomorrow with another show. Hope you enjoyed it. My name's Drew Moholland, live from Drew's house, another edition here from my kitchen. So we'll see you next time, folks. Bye-bye now.